So today we are talking about the Quest. Everybody in here, I take it that you did the first rendition of this. So I want to talk first and foremost kind of about the differences in it and what we're really trying to achieve when we do these kinds of things. We can get into the weeds about how to support it and whatnot. Objectively, though, this is like a very different program. The first Quest was really based off of the idea that I think I don't like how people really look at like aesthetic training. Bodybuilding is, although we like learn a lot from it, it's really kind of like a disgusting sport or culture that is kind of emphasizing the wrong part of like development. So that was the idea going into the Quest. To make it kind of like, obviously it has to be fun. Obviously we're touching into like I don't know, whenever I think about like aesthetics and bodybuilding and I think of like 80s action movies, or like, all of this stuff comes into play, and that makes it fun for me. But the real idea behind it is actually, we really just want to develop the tissue so I can understand how my body works in time and space. And if you guys don't know, if you haven't like dove into some of the more recent stuff, you probably might be surprised that we have kind of a different take maybe on building mass. But I don't technically want to build mass just to be a bigger human, although some insulation with the tissue is important, and it obviously potentiates the ability to be stronger. I obviously came from a world, endurance sports and even like weight class sports, where you're always trying to be as small as possible to have the biggest bang for the buck possible. So you're potentiating as much muscle mass as possible, and that's one way to do it. However, that's only 50% of the growth factors that you can get. And so through the old systems that I first learned, where you don't have to get big to be strong, that's only partially true. That's not a absolute truth. The truth is that there's really two ways to gain strength and potentiation of a muscle. And the first one is like the neurological way, and the other way is through the rate of size. So if you imagine expanding, making a muscle bigger, it gives you actually more access to potentiation. And we want to do both. I think in common bodybuilding these days, the average person is just making it bigger and they're not potentiating it. And I think the other way we go, when we go to like severely strict sports science routes, they're just potentiating because they don't want to be big and useless. So you get sports like climbing, jiu-jitsu, even cycling. All of these sports are trying to maintain the smallest, most efficient frame and trying to get the highest power output. However, for the average person, we don't need that kind of specificity, right? That's not what we're looking for. So we've excluded that. None of us are trying to become like, muscle pageant victims, trying to like, not trying to be orange and wear like I'm not opposed to it, but like a sparkling bikini bottom and impress people with like how much vanity I have. But the attributes that come from that are really absolutely interesting. So they make it so how I relate to strength endurance now is it is a function of confidence. So I'm always trying to get to what the physical action relates to the sensation or emotional content and the psychological output. So those three things, if you look at anything that we do on the site, it will have those three layers plugged into it somewhere. It might not be obvious at first, but strength endurance or hypertrophy is really how to truly build confidence. And this is what's the weird question about a program like this, is that am I trying to get big and muscular and lean in order to tell people I'm confident, or does the action of building lean tissue and articulating the muscle over and over repeatedly give me a form of confidence because I know the output of the input? And I would argue that the action is what leads to the psychological state. Because if you look at the kind of like most perverse versions of the sport where people are, taking copious amounts of anabolic agents, and they're using like this story just came out, so I haven't got to use it because it's crazy. This girl in Australia was found to be, she was using like Deca and D-ball in order to like get ready for like a figure show. Talk about like the most powerful androgynous substances on the planet. This like dainty girl was using to build muscle, wrecked her. And then in order to cut the fat off, she used a methamphetamine. So she's like smoking crack and injecting insane amounts of like D-bol in order to appear to other people that she's this vibrant, healthy person. And it made me laugh. But that, like, the most perverse versions of it are escaping the road to real confidence. The real thing that you see, and maybe it's kind of like the best version of this in reality. He obviously is like a charismatic character, right? Like he exudes confidence. If you watch any of the videos from the 70s, his interviews, he's like, it's almost not an act. Like, it's almost like his pure sense of self was self-belief, which is kind of crazy because his first goal was not to become the biggest bodybuilder in the world. His first goal was to be the biggest movie star in the world. That he was still living in a village, in a house in Austria that didn't have indoor plumbing. And that kind of self-belief comes from somewhere, and we don't know where. But I would like to articulate that I think it actually comes from action. And so if you look at our layering for when we talk about, the psyche and the emotional centers and the physical kind of capabilities, you can't really have one without the other. If you do, the whole system falls apart. But a lot of people are a top-down model. So a lot of people that are interested in, say, changing themselves, like any kind of transformation, it's going to come from this, I have this idea about myself. So if they're thinking about it, and then they're like, but I don't feel like doing it. It seems hard, right? And then they go, well, I don't feel like it. So there's no action that comes from it. Though this whole concept comes from essentially how we engineer society, which is we take infants, children, very small children, and you can recognize what their interaction with the world is. You recognize their conscious state almost immediately. They're like grabbing things and putting them in their mouth and pushing things over and seeing how they react. They're pure action. They don't have the conscious awareness to worry about the future. They don't have the capacity to be anxious about the past because they don't have a prefrontal cortex. So everything that they do is acting in the moment. So we basically start from our birth as beings, as in I'm in the moment and I'm only responding to my environment. So as a pure action, you start to see them develop the nerves of what we would call the heart centers or the emotional capacities. And then you see something really wild, which is like a 2 or 3 year old will trip. They'll like hit their face and then like nothing happens. And we're like, okay, he's cool, he's chill. But you take his pen away and he has like a meltdown. The whole thing burns down. And that's because the child's really learning to understand and conceptualize the emotional centers that are developing. So you go from being to feeling, and then around the age of 7, you really start to connect in the prefrontal cortex, and you start to develop the idea of logic, foresight, thinking patterns, stuff like that. And that's why we start to indoctrinate children into that area. And all the way up until about the age 25 to 27, that's the process. So we reach the pinnacle of human existence kind of around the age of 27. And that's where somebody would say, you're an adult because you can think, you're not stupid, you figured things out, you use logic and rational, you're a rational being. However, that's where it starts. That's where it stops. In other traditions, and namely, older traditions, that was actually where we descend to the journey back down to learn how to use our rational thought to understand our feelings and then understand our action. And so the idea is to come back to being, the idea of being pure action and not having to worry or be emotional about it or just understanding how the emotions feel around it. Well, when we come from the bottom up to use that feature, realistically, the idea there is very, very simple. Don't think about it. Don't feel about it. Just start moving. And if you start moving, movement is the fastest way to change how you feel. And the second you change how you feel, it will change how you think. And once you change how you think, it'll reinforce how you feel, and it'll reinforce the action. It's one of the problems with most people waiting to feel good about something, right? You're like, it's never going to happen because it's a closed loop between overthinking and overfeeling. Oh, I feel terrible. Oh, I think terrible. Now that I think terrible, I feel even more terrible. So one of the ways that I like to think about this aspect and apply it to the idea of building mass or building, uh, lean tissue or leaning out and getting into the aesthetic part of this, which is not necessarily superficial, is that you just need to start moving. And the way we do that is not by thinking about how many sets and reps necessarily. That is probably the most uninteresting part of training, which is like how many reps, what's the weight, what's the set. The reason why we are geared that way is because as humans, we're really looking for like a flow chart of how to do something, an instruction list, a very, binary. If you do X, you'll get Y. And if you do X plus Z, you'll get something else. That is not how any of this works. Like if anybody on here, if we do the same load in the same rep set structure, we will have totally different outcomes. I don't really even care, if we have very similar backgrounds, we're the same age, we're the same body type, we have, similar sports that we played, you will respond differently, which means that we need to take into consideration the thing that is happening while we are doing the effort. Does that make sense to everybody? It's like just kind of an oversight of how we came to this position. Now, the reason I've gotten rid of the idea of reps necessarily, not necessarily sets, but the idea of repetition is because I know human nature tries to get, human nature wants to have had done it. It does not want to do the doing. And we need to get away from that idea if you're going to change the physiology. If you want to change the landscape, you have to be into the doing of the changing. That's how the change happens. So the reason why that works, and this is kind of a phenomenon that I started picking up on when I was just messing with the idea. I gave somebody, I think like a set of 15, this is years ago. And I just watched them bam, 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 bang it out. And I was like, oh, I don't think that's the same thing, man. Yeah, you did it really fast. And, he was tired-ish, but it missed the point of what we were talking about. And it missed, energetically. We see this in, bodybuilding circles where they talk about the mind-muscle connection. They're using very slow repetitions in order to connect and bring in the tension and the control. And that is, I would say that's a correlation to a growth factor. Well, I said, so instead of doing 15, I kind of averaged out in my head and went, well, a 10 reps should take about 30 seconds. So 15 reps should be about 45 seconds. I was like, do 45 seconds of the press that you were doing. And immediately when the timer went on, he started moving very, very slowly, right? He just started adjusting his pace because he can't escape. He can't bang it out and get out of the way. So one of the things that humans always look for is the shortcut. And if there's 10 repetitions, we try to do it as fast as possible. So we miss the opportunity of the signal. What we want is the signal. That's the signal to change the architecture of the tissue. So one of the reasons for the time-based thing is that just very basic principle that all of us have is that if I could do this faster and get it over with quicker, I'm going to have that predisposition. And that's something that we need to select for in our training. That's one of the things that we want to control for. I'm not trying to get away from this. I'm trying to get what I'm doing to work to a greater effect. And that is the reason for the time-based platform. However, it is very hard to dial in an appropriate load because you have to have, because you slow down and because the tension increases, a lot of weights that you could use for 10 to 15 reps tend to be frustratingly difficult. And that is a good thing because in any kind of training aspect, we think about it, fortunately, kind of like investment, which is I want the least risk possible and the biggest return. And the more weight I use inherently, the more risk that I have. So if I can reduce the risk and increase the return, that's called asymmetrical upside to investment. And that's kind of how we want our training to appear. There's something really cool, obviously, about somebody grabs 100-pound dumbbells and they just start repping it because you're like, wow, that guy, first of all, it's an amount of confidence that, only experience gets you, an amount of strength and amount of development that is it's easy to appreciate. However, when we worry about that side of it, we're really more focused on the external validation than the internal sensation. And training is about the internal sensation. It has nothing to do with a metric that you can tell somebody about. And this is why it comes back to pure confidence. the confidence is a knowing of yourself and what you are capable of. And the only way to know that is to go through the experience, to move the weight, to do the repetitions, to be the time under tension. That is where true confidence is born. So by definition, confidence can be thought about as a repeated action with a known outcome. That's where confidence is born. And so by repeating a movement through a range of motion, certain tension and a certain load, you quite literally build the psychological aspect of it. And that to me, I think might be one of the more fascinating parts about training, is that we aim for it thinking that it's something else. And by the time we get through the process of using physiology to change ourselves, we're like, wow, that was very different than what I thought it would be. Even if I added the 10 pounds of mass, or I cut the body fat off, or I did yada, 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 the psychological and emotional changes are probably the things that we're going to remember, because almost all of our memories are rooted in some kind of emotional, an emotional memory to it, the sensations that are involved into it. Not necessarily like how, maybe the average person would describe an emotional experience, but it really is the sensational experience, what the irrational part of ourselves that can't exactly validate or quantify the experience. That becomes the important part of it. So that's a long introduction into how we ended up wanting to redo the quest on the second time around. The first time around was absolutely a high volume program. Mostly I was thinking, I didn't have a strategy yet for how to, for lack of a better term, get rid of these fucking cheaters. Like these people that were they were technically doing the work. They were doing the 3 sets of 10, but they were missing the sensations and the time that you take to develop yourself between you and that effort. And so I was like, God, how am I going to make this so, somebody can't do it? So I was like, fuck it. It's 100 reps. Do 100 reps, and then eventually nobody can hide. But one of the downsides to that is wear and tear, because, if we go back through the science of it, essentially, whenever we do something repeatedly, that becomes a specific signal. So a range of motion that is repeated with load tells the body to get good at that thing. Everybody can agree that's the SAID principle. That's like the basics of physiology. However, a lot of people ignore the basics of physiology in sports science. It says the more you do something in a counteracting way, the less it works. So as you do a high volume program, you start to come into an area where, it's going to cause an equal opposite reaction. I'm going to start developing in ways that I can't continue the stimulus. And this is what kind of led me down the road of I think we're all using volume a lot of the times to escape the requirement for intensity. So if you guys don't know, maybe this is a helpful reminder that there's really four real actions that you can do to affect the tissue, connective tissue and muscular tissue. And that's obviously max effort. You do something full on max output for essentially one repetition or one pass of the range of motion. That's the most powerful signal you can sell to your physiology to change itself. It's basically saying, this is the force, this is how intense it is. If you can't handle it, we're going to die. And so your body goes to work diverting resources to add tissue or neurons or anything that is involved in being able to handle that stress a second time. The second way to affect tissue is through dynamic overload. Essentially the same thing. It is a max effort, but there's a time variant to it. So the tissue dynamic changes because the requirement to go fast overloads the tissue and the nervous system, and then you upregulate. The third way is through repetitions till failure. So I take the muscle tissue to exhaustion, which sometimes gets confused with quitting, but it should be easy to identify a muscle that can't fire anymore because it can't remove waste products, stuff like that. The fourth way is the way that everybody trains, which is repetitions not till failure. That is by far, and I mean by far, what you see in most gyms around the world. People repeating an effort not close to failure and then wondering why they don't get a reaction. Those are the only 4 ways you can affect the tissue. So when we look at it, if we affect it max effort, it changes the tissue in maybe an aspect that I don't want to change it. It's not making it necessarily bigger or able to handle more load. If I change the dynamics to go speed, it's also the same thing. It's a highly neurological signal. But I start changing it and getting close to failure, and this is a very strong signal to change the architecture of the tissue. That's what we want to focus on, a way to get to mechanical or muscular failure so that it can send the strongest signal in the lowest amount of work possible. And that is what leads to kind of like how we're building the entire aspect of this program is simply based off of that. Up front, I think we have a comment section over here. So if you guys want, I'll invite you to like start writing your questions now or just start working on them so I can like start reading through them and we can get to them by the end of this. We'll have like a pretty good idea of maybe how to answer anybody's questions that might not be answered through stuff that we've already done. The next part of this I really kind of like want to go into is the duration. The 10 weeks is because 12 weeks was way too much. And I know this is like ridiculous, but like, what is it about 10 and 12 weeks? Well, when we look at cycles of growth, I think you're seeing the biology come out in the mental aspects of being able to engage with a very specific task. It's very hard to concentrate on something that requires so much effort and so much recovery past the 3-month period, 12 weeks. I don't know why that is, but it's obvious. We were trying to hold out for 16 weeks during the original quest, and at 10 weeks I saw it in people's eyes, like the lights shut off, like there wasn't an oomph, there wasn't a drive. And when I compare that to what I see the average person doing in a gym, and let's just admit that the average person in a gym is doing like a quasi shitty bodybuilding program, right? It's a bro split. Oh, today's lats and back, or bis and tris, or today's chest, or today's leg day, and today's cardio. And they're basically taking these things, like these programs and these progressive overloading systems from maybe influencers or professional bodybuilders, or now, which is most common, which is like shitty muscle mag routines. And they're designating 3 sets of 10 at like 60%, or which nobody goes off of percentage because that's dumb. But you basically like do a hard set of 10 and you'll grow. And they end up doing a pathetic set of 10 because there's no attention behind it. And they've been doing this like process of building muscle since they were 18, and they were like in a high school weight room, and this is like, oh, I just want to get jacked with my bros. Nothing has ever changed. And past the first 6 months, almost nobody develops. There's almost no muscular development in somebody. And I really think that has to do with the time that they spend doing it doesn't have a limitation. By setting a limitation, I can actually enhance the focus. And this is what's so important about understanding the duration of effort. In a singular effort, we notice this. If I tell you to run flat out with no known end, when are you going to quit? Pretty soon, because you don't know if it's a day or an hour. So the effort curtails very, very quickly. As soon as I say, hey, you're going to have to run for an hour, you subconsciously know, kind of, especially with some kind of experience, what that kind of sensation takes. So if I just start, I'm going to build muscle objectively, I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to do 3 sets of 10, upper body, whatever, lower. I'm just going to do that perpetually until I'm as big as I think that I can. Well, it never happens because the effort is not contained. But if I go, hey, this program is 10 weeks, immediately how to pace these efforts. Now, there's only 3 dedicated sessions a week, but and respect the fact that if I don't get that signal sent in those 3 sessions a week, I'm not going to grow. Now, you'll probably need more than that, and we'll get to that like in the next segment, like how to add in more. But 3 is to understand that the intensity is absolutely the most important part. And if you can do one of these sessions, and then the next day you could do it again, you didn't go hard enough. I did the first session Tuesday. My hips yesterday were still sore. They were still, and I'm not exactly out of shape. So like the effect is very hard. My upper body day, we did the upper body session on Thursday, and today I was still like, oh fuck, my chest. Like it's still in my left pec for whatever reason, felt it more than my right. This is what I'm talking, like I wouldn't even think about doing another upper body day unless it was something like completely different. You know, it was like an isolation of sorts. That is the kind of that's the kind of intensity I want you to carry into each one of these sessions. Also realize if you go in and you're like, I don't think I have it. Cool. Like, don't do it. Like, do it another day. Take a rest day, chill, walk on the treadmill, do something else that like is informative. And that comes back down to a structure that a lot of people are starting to get the clue of, which is I recommend, and I'll write something official on this because I'm still working out kind of like how I think about it. But I don't like to work in 7-day increments. This sounds stupid, but I work in like 9-day increments. I like 9-day blocks. And I like 6 of those to be training days and 3 of those to be dedicated rest days. I actually work harder, not work harder, but I'm more concentrated on making sure that I have 3 rest days because they support the 6 training days. Out of the 6 training days, I want 3 of those days to be very, very, very difficult. Enough that I can absolutely guarantee that I'm going to need recovery. And then the other 3 are supplemental, which means I'm moving, I'm working, I'm trying different things, I'm supporting other structures, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to have an adaptive signal from it necessarily. You could. I'll explain like this week how this like 9-day period kind of worked. I have almost 4 of those sessions I would conclude were like geared towards hypertrophy. So I'm a little bit over on even like what I should be getting. The other 2, it was like a hard capacity session, but I wasn't redlining it. And then the other day was like a long endurance day just to keep the aerobic nature up. So I got 6 sessions in and I'm on my like 2nd recovery day almost in a row before I go back to a hard session, probably tomorrow or maybe even the next day. I might extend the recovery, or tomorrow becomes what I call like a gray day. It's still a training day, but it's not hard enough and it's not focused on the objective. Those 2 things that we just talked about, having a dedicated end time and knowing how many hard days I can tolerate, that focuses how you put effort into something and ensure that you get a response out of it. We've all faced this, like when I don't really have brackets around how long I'm supposed to do something or what exactly I'm focused on, nobody can hold an effort. It's erratic, it's sporadic, it doesn't really do it. And if I do it too long, you're facing something like that most people face, which is like training burnout. And training burnout isn't a physiological thing, it's a mental part of it. The psychology behind burnout has almost nothing to do with physical effort, almost nothing. It has to do with not seeing the reward from your effort. I'm not seeing the progress. And in physiology, we really like these waves, and these waves should be coherent. That's kind of a thing that I think a lot of people miss in training, is that coherent waves mean like I have a signature to my stress. I have a, almost a mathematical or a patterned way that I push stress and I recover from it. I push stress and I recover from it. Most of us are on a week-based system only because we base it off of our work week, which is a terrible way to develop yourself, because you're already, like that's not prioritizing any of your physical development. It's just prioritizing your livelihood. And it's really hard to get patterns out of 7. I know that sounds really dumb and mathematical and almost like wooey, but I find it's almost impossible to get coherent signals out of a 7-day pattern. Even CrossFit goes 3 on 1 off. Right? Even the original, physician for, the Roman gladiators, Galen, talked about, the 4-day cycles of the humors. Like people have found patterns throughout history. And the fact that we need to find patterns in this, I don't think it's any different. So I would recommend that when you use this thing, I'm coming out with these sequences every 7 days. But when I'm doing them, I'm actually working on a 9-day schedule. That's one of the original intents of the program from the very beginning, was that I don't want anybody to build I do this every week. I wanted an ongoing thing. So all of them are marked down in essentially a month is 28 days, right? And if you do the math, you'll kind of see what I'm saying, right? Where there's like these injections of 9-day cycles with a little room for error. Does that make sense, everybody? We have any questions yet from people that have questions about what we've talked about so far? All good? You can raise your hand or hit the button or write it in the comments if that's easier for you. Next part is the diet. Has everybody downloaded the new manual? All good? So diet is interesting. It's fairly simple, to be quite honest. Like this is not hyper complex, but it is where most people get stuck. And I'll explain it like this. I didn't put any metrics in for kind of like what you should aim for, because I think you have to notice what you should aim for. If you're not gaining weight, you're not eating enough. And if you're gaining a lot of weight, you're probably eating too much. And this is quite literally all we need to look at. We will break it down, obviously, into proper macronutrients, because that is the way to potentially aim for the best kind of weight gain. But take the week to probably understand what you're eating now. Like, take the 7 days, record everything down, track the body weight, make sure it stays the same from start to finish. If it stays the same to start to finish, it was an accurate portrayal of what you're doing. Once you get to the end of that week, you want to increase it probably by about 500 calories, or maybe 1,000 if you're like I'll just say a skinnier type of person. So if you're like wiry framed, go ahead and add it. If you're a little bit softer, or you tend to, feel like you put on weight without really watching your food, I would say go in smaller increments, probably 250 to 500. And that's kind of the key. You only need just enough. That's the way. This isn't about a blowout, and we're not taking 3 months to eat like pigs. You're taking 3 months to add additional resources and build something up, not blow it out. And I think that is probably the mistake that I see a lot of people make. If you have a hard time gaining weight, just continue to add in calories that are good, high quality calories, right? Like, prioritize protein. It's not that difficult. If you're getting full very easily and you're like not hungry, liquid calories, right? That's it. That's it. If the end of the week you didn't gain around half a pound to a pound, you just eat a little bit more. And if you gained 2 pounds, chill a little bit. That's it. It's not super complex. Get into a mode where like the food is known, so you don't have to count it. So you understand the food that you're eating. So eat the same foods in like, varying flavors. That's kind of how I put it. Almost every day, it's not like the same food. We eat different foods, but because I'm not a big fan of just like that much repetition, but they're the same kinds of foods. So like how I make ground beef or how I make chicken, or how it's kind of the same proportions. It's just flavored differently. It's really not that hard. Also, I would implore you to make good tasting food. This is like the challenge for any guy, which is like I know they're gonna like, you're gonna go boil rice and put hamburger meat in it, and you'll be so over this in about 2.5 weeks, because you're like, this sucks. Like, I'm so tired of this thing. You really do need to learn how to make food taste good if you were going to eat beyond what you should, because your satiation, your satiety mechanisms, all of that stuff will shut you down, and then you will make minimal gains. The question here is like, I want to make maximal muscle gains with minimal fat gain, or I want to hold as much muscle and lose as much fat as possible. Those are kind of the two options. Recomposition is really all what we're talking about. If you can use the program to build mass and lose fat at the same time, only generally if you're a beginner. But past a certain point, you're going to kind of have to choose one, right? And if you're choosing one, it means you're going to have to risk adding fat if you're adding muscle, or risk burning tissue if you're burning fat. Does that make sense to everybody? It's like essentially past the first novel 6 months of training experience, you're going to be more geared towards having to kind of like prioritize one or the other. However, there are very much outliers in this, in which case you have people that like the guy, this is kind of a weird one. The guy on one of the stunties on 300 Rise of an Empire when we were working on it, he was 185 pounds, a little bit softer, stunty from California. Came out, we like stripped his calories down to like almost nothing because we're like, let's just like lean him out. We were projecting that he would be maybe like 160 pounds when we're done with him, and he would look very skinny, but in context, he'll look jacked and he'll look kind of like a Spartan. And after like, what was it? Maybe 2 months, we weighed him and he weighed 185 pounds and he looked like a completely different person. He had put on easily 10 pounds of muscle and taken off 5 pounds of fat because he had never trained like this before. So there are these like examples of where his weight stayed the same and he looks like a completely different person. That can happen, and it does, especially if this is like a novel stimulus. So that's kind of the good part. The major point that you want to make with like food, dieting, and understanding aesthetic is that you'll become very aware of how closely your emotionality is attached to what you eat and how you interact with other people. And this disrupts that quite a bit, or at least it should. And you can always go back. This is kind of the fascinating part. There's a large part of the demographic of especially in the fitness world, especially through, the mediums of social media and all of that stuff that are like really denigrating any kind of advice towards diet is as a means that it causes an eating disorder. And I would argue, first of all, that's just factually, just linguistically incorrect, right? Whenever I eat and I don't understand what I'm eating and I don't know what I'm eating and there's no pattern, that's technically disorder. So if I have no idea what I ate, I have no idea what it does to me, and I have no idea the composition of the food, I have disordered eating. If, however, I start to control the amount, I control the quality, and I control the time, that's ordered eating. And that is what leads to something, a change, is when I can control the aspects. And we get this with clients every day, especially in Erin's company, Alchemist, where we do diagnostics, which is, people come to her generally with some health ailment of some sort. And effectually, we can't do anything until we understand diet. And almost inherently, the people with the worst problems also have an aversion to even addressing what they're eating. They're like, oh, no, I don't want an eating disorder. And they're like, oh, I did that once. I got so neurotic and it drove me crazy. There's something to address it. Yeah, like starting to count anything is going to increase neuroticism a little bit. Right? Whenever you increase focus, you increase this idea that you have to measure what matters, and what matters gets measured. So you start to build these habits or these designations. That is mostly the framing in your psychology and your emotional centers around food. That's what we're dealing with. And now you back up and you start to understand people will have problems with this because of their childhood, or maybe they didn't have access to certain foods, or maybe they were called fat, or whatever the trauma enacted the thing. However, I contend, and I still try to explain this to most people, even if you have a background of traumatic experiences with diet, traumatic experiences with being heavy or not liking your look or your aesthetic or being disappointed in yourself, I would still contend that the best way to understand yourself is to understand the underlying metrics, right? There's not one person in the world, or there shouldn't be, that's like, hey, I'm tired of being poor, I want to get rich. And some, financial advisors, well, don't check your bank account. Like, don't even look. Don't even look at the price tags of the stuff you buy. That's not a way that you ever understand the mechanics of your finances. And it's the same rule that comes over to the mechanics of your food. There is, however, some emotional behavior things that come up, and that's okay. I think you should address them. So if something comes up in that realm, I think it's like healthy disposition to go, oh shit, I didn't know at night for a really long time that I just needed like a sweet thing. It was just like this habit born into me where I'm like, in order to feel like I had completed or I was a good boy, it didn't go away until I was like 40. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't have this thing it was just something that I
noticed because I was controlling for calories and controlling for macronutrients. And when I would get to the end of the day, I was like, well, that's going to dictate how I make my sweet thing, whether it's like low fat yogurt or full fat yogurt, or it has like 2 scoops of protein because I totally fucked up my like protein intake for the day, or it's all carbs, and I'm just eating a sack of gummy bears or something like that. The concept behind that is like, first and foremost, it's just another perspective of looking at yourself. And this is what I think most people shy away from in training, because training basically reveals the same things. And through nutritional changes, is all of these aspects are just very interesting ways of trying to view my behavior in the world and what affects it. And the more you try to understand that, I really do think the better you can get, because it first takes with that observation in order to make these alterations. That really is like that's the foundation to any of this stuff. So I want that to come up. I want to address it just because, if I'm fairly strict when people are like, how do I do this? I'll tell you how to do it. And then like, I can't do that. And then we talk about the reasons why. I think that is the way to it. But if, it's also, I don't talk about diet publicly very much, because it's so contentious. If I post something about what I do, the first thing that I'll get back from somebody's like, I can't do that. And you're like, okay. So where do we learn about diet if the entire fitness universe is contentious about what the perfect diet is or what the perfect ratios are? There aren't any. The way to a perfect diet is through self-discovery and self-knowledge, and trying to ask hard questions about, why am I eating this? Why am I geared towards this food instead of that food? And you find, and I wrote about this in the Lean Mass Guide, and I think this is probably where I've settled, which is like, we are generally the byproduct of some kind of uncaring economic capitalistic kind of force that's trying to extrapolate money from us. That's where a lot of our behavior comes from. Not that capitalism is wrong, or that any of these things are wrong. It's just there is alternative consequences to trying to make money off of food through restaurants and pre-prepared, prepackaged, and ultra processed foods. And it's never the question to offering somebody food. I don't care where you go. It's never, this will make them healthier. This will help build muscle tissue. They do not care, right? It's taste and pleasure, and they want you to come back and eat more. And if you can do those things, you attract people to it. Well, now I need to figure out how to make money off of it. And the cheapest foods happen to be sometimes the most unhealthy, or the hardest to help you organize your behavior, your tissues, your physiology. So I like that approach, because it helps me remember when I go out to eat, make alterations. They do not give a fuck about your diet. And therefore, if you go to a restaurant and you recognize that they're going to feed you a bunch of bread up front, which is going to make it harder to hit a protein goal, and they're going to overload it with fat, because fat makes things tasty. Understand, make the alterations up front. Know that you probably need to double the protein, and that you need to minimize the fat and the carbohydrate to a controlled source. So this is really weird, but break the foods down so that they're at least separate. This happened the other day. We went to this Mexican restaurant that we really like, because they have super ceviche, and it's really easy to get protein separated from things. Granted, their chips are the downfall. So what I noticed though is I got ordered the carne asada, comes on this platter. I'm measuring it in my head. I'm 3, 4, okay, that's 11 ounces of carne asada. It's flank, so it's lean, but there's definitely an oil on it when they cook it. So I'm okay, I'm trying to do the math. I think I'm okay for protein, but it came with a side, and one of the sides was chorizo and mashed potato. And I took one look at that and was there's no fucking way I even know how they made that. I don't know is there cream in it? Is there cheese in it? Is there, so I just didn't eat it, because what are the odds that it fits the ratio that I need? Right? Slim to none, probably. Realistically, is that, when they're making these tasty dishes back there, they're man, we can't serve that. Michael's not going to be jacked if he eats that. That's what I'm concerned with. I want to build muscle. I want to be leaner. I want to look better. I want to perform better. Eating at restaurants, first and foremost, needs to be an active, conscious choice to alter the foods to fit what I need. They will alter it. Why? Because they want to sell you more shit anyway. So Erin does this. She's like kind of famous for, I don't care what's on a menu. She changes it. It could be the best thing ever. And she's like, oh, I want this, but I want you to switch this out. I think it's her disposition to just make sure she has control over her food. And she will always change like the oil. She will always change the protein. She will always change the, can I do this instead of this? Or can you serve this on the side? As a, just as a way to kind of like maybe set the boundary for what she needs to get over what the restaurant wants to serve. And if the restaurant won't make alterations, we leave. I know that's really weird, but we do. We're like, oh, you can't alter the food? Okay, we're gone. Also, this is also another weird thing that we do, but I found it to be really, really helpful. Don't let your friends pick the restaurant, especially if they're fat. Seriously, like don't listen to them. It's not that hard. Like all you have to say is no. We have friends who are like, oh, do you want to go to this great Italian place? And I go, no, I get to choose. If I like the Italian restaurant, we'll go there. But I'm the one who's picky. I'm the one who cares. I'm the one who spent 20 years of my life making sure that I understand food and diet and nutrition and training. I'm not going to let, the girl who does Zumba for exercise, who thinks that a kale shake is like a health food, I'm not going to let her decide where I eat dinner, because she'll go anywhere as long as they have a tasty snack. And that means sometimes we don't hang out with some friends. It's just like, sorry. Like, some of you guys have been out to eat with us. So you'll kind of know. If you come visit us, we'll take you out to eat and you'll see immediately how we do this. And it sounds like a dickhead move, but really think about this from the aspect of most of the fitness or diet advice that you get out there. Like, think about what it's based off of. Okay, you need to go this ratio of protein, this, and this. And they're basically teaching you how to minimize things or diet based off of, prepping and stuff like that. The biggest consequence to a diet not working, it really has to do with the environment and the people that you hang out with. That's what's going to dictate whether you can do it. So it's important because, and we're spending a lot of time on like the nutrition aspect of it, because if you don't do it, you can't produce or sustain the results that we're trying to get from the work. The work won't work. Or if you don't eat to support it, you can't build mass. And I see this happen a lot where somebody will go, I gained mass, sure, but I gained too much fat. Okay, you did the right thing. It was just slightly off. Or what happens more often than not, somebody goes into one of these things, they start actually down dieting, and then they lose a ton of mass because they're not supporting the extra effort. And they're like, man, I'm leaner, but I lost a ton of muscle. And this is one of the reasons to dial in the effort and make sure that we're feeding it correctly. I also wanted to redo this program as like, the part 2, rather, is because I want to be closer to that line of getting enough signal and not too much. And I like that line more and more. It shows that you have good awareness. It shows like I'm not overdoing it. I'm not risking anything. I'm not having to make up for meals, all of that stuff. The closer I could sit to that and gain leaning mass, the better. Now, what are the things that I'm aiming for? It'd be the same rules as last time. A pound lost is the same as a pound gained, right? In muscle or fat. So if you lose a pound of fat, it's the same point system as losing a pound of muscle or gaining a pound of muscle, rather. However, think about it like this. When I gain muscle, it is astronomically better than losing a pound of fat. And I'll describe why, but that's because you change the ratio of your body fat percentage. Your ratio of lean mass to fat it exponentially gets better with mass gain. Now, you don't want to gain, and this happens all the time, like generally when people do like dirty bulks, they gain 5 pounds of fat for every 1 pound of mass. That's a terrible ratio. So we want to minimize that, but we really want to prioritize gaining lean tissue. That's the whole game. We'll do the same metrics. How to measure, that's up to you, but you can use InBody. You can get a DEXA scan. You can kind of do whatever you want. We're getting ours on Tuesday. We have a lady come here with a truck, and she has like a dunk tank for the like official, and it's like really accurate. Erin's been tracking her InBody for like 7 years, like every 3 months. So she has a ton of data. That was like one of the reasons why we used her as an example of like somebody who's extremely well developed. But also, if we do this correctly and feed correctly, she gained 3.5 pounds of mass, and I think she gained 2 pounds of fat, right? You would never know it because as a female, she sits at like 9.6% body fat on average, which is like extremely low. It's about 50% of what a average female would sit at. She just has a disposition to being lean. That sucks, but she's leaner than me most days. Sucks. And she can get more jacked. But we wanted to use that because we want to show that you can do both ways. So that was the reason why we did it. How you measure it, I don't really care about the specifics. Just show that you see a starting point and a finish point so you can kind of like objectively see the alterations along the way, and it can like lead to something fruitful. What else do we got to go over? So we did diet, we did structure. Anybody else have any questions while I think about what to end on?
That's a question.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Can you chat a little bit about kind of like the maintenance of kind of aerobic efforts?
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, cool. Thanks, Rory. So the program within other programs. So the signal, the thing that we're going to stress, the 3 hard sessions per cycle, that's the important thing. If I want to support aerobic effort, so I still do jujitsu 3 days a week. I still do 1 hard capacity session a week. And I generally go on a lot of walks and at least 1 long run or something like that. So my maintenance might look a little bit different because I'm getting a lot of my aerobic support from jujitsu. How that would work for somebody that doesn't have like a sport or an avenue for that is it would be your like other 3 days in the six day sequence. Those would be geared towards your aerobic support. Now, the only rule for that is don't get it to overwhelm the other signal. That's it. So if you are, keeping zone 2 in, I just don't want to try to push zone 2. I just want to keep it in maintenance mode, which means it needs to be a signal that is high enough or long enough to tell my body that don't lose this adaptation. And then we just think about what the actual energy system is. So given the split between energy systems, we're going to go for this. I think I have a diagram here. Nope, I don't. It's not up right now. When we think about the energy systems, we really think about the endpoints are very stable. So strength and endurance, they last quite a while. And because we're working strength endurance and it is like closer to strength than it is endurance, it's going to influence most obviously positively, but power is the tricky one. So if you need to keep power in, this is the one that is probably going to go down while you do this, unless you make a concerted effort to fit one in probably one every 9 days. So you need like a hard power session in order to keep peak power. However, because it's volatile, and just like aerobic capacity is volatile. So if you're going to choose something to lose the volatile ones because they're the fastest that come back too. I do the supportive structure. Also, in the supportive structure of building mass, the supportive structure like endurance or aerobic ability supports recoverability. So by doing kind of like long walks, hikes, runs, or even bike efforts, or in some cases like even some of the like shakeouts or whatnot, a lot of that stuff will just help keep you tuned up, and it doesn't take very much. If you do a strength signal like once every, a couple of days, like I would say 10 days is about it, is like the half-life of it, you will never see a drop in strength, in pure output strength. Power, however, is a weird feature. It peaks and flows like, every 3 days or something. It has like this really fast cycle, which is why you notice like if you don't do a hard workout for like a week and you come back to a hard workout, you're like, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to die. You feel like there's no air in the room. That's because it's volatile. It didn't go away, but it's easier to get back to. However, you lose an endurance base, and it's like months until you can get it. It takes like months to build this stuff back. Strength, once it's become atrophied, takes quite a while to come back to. Probably, 1 to 2 months. It'll come back faster if you're more trained or more developed, but that's the aspect to it. So when you're planning this stuff up, we look at it like I'm still aiming for GPP, and GPP means I'm not prioritizing any one signal. I'm not trying to get good at any one thing, but because this is like kind of a conjugated emphasis part of gaining mass, I'm going to focus on the mass gain. And in that, you'll see obviously a lot of mobility, and you'll also see a lot of shakeouts in there. So a lot of the warm-ups from this first 3 sessions, you'll notice that, man, they're like 20 minutes long, and they're a little bit aerobic in fact. And then you get into kind of the signal of hypertrophy. I do that in order to kind of like prime the aerobic signal to keep it up so I don't need so much other stuff. I also hide a lot of a little bit of explosive work in here too, because I still like, I'll prime the legs by jumping sometimes, as potentiation for when we're trying to like develop the musculature anyway. And that also means, so I'm not going to like lose so much power output, if that makes sense. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Anybody else? All good? Cool. So, wish you guys luck during this whole like exploration. I'm trying to make a video for every session that kind of goes more into the details of everything. So everything's like very clear. Also, I think that's, one thing I didn't touch on is like kind of the intuitive part of this. I decide kind of on the day how it should go. Some days I bump forward, or some days I feel good and I like run through it. But I want you to almost do kind of the same thing. And that is, I want you to be very intuitive with this and alter anything that you need. Don't be afraid that you're not going to send the signal because you did a different exercise or you decided to kind of like alter the angle. That's like completely unimportant. Exercises are unimportant, right? As long as they feed the sensation to the right, part of the body, totally fine. If curls hurt, or if like tricep pushdowns bother your elbows, or, you can't bench press because your shoulder's kind of funky, alter everything. It doesn't matter. I'm not exercise obsessed. I really want to focus on like where you think the growth is happening. And what you'll notice is a lot of this is secretly, surprise, we're putting a lot of hypertrophy in rotational capacities, not linear movement. So a lot of the stuff that we're priming through a lot of what we're known for, the mobility, the capsule cars and weighted cars, stuff like that. We're trying to, that's the easiest muscle to gain because it hasn't been affected yet. Like a lot of people at bench press, it's really hard to put mass on through bench press if you've done a lot. However, I can gain mass like crazy in my rotator cuff because I've never done it. So 10 to 15 pounds is equal to a acidic signal, which then sends the signal that I need to build tissue in the rotator cuff. So that's kind of like how we'll treat that. One question from Jeremiah. So lower effort capacity work on off days is good. Yeah, absolutely. Make it, when I mean low effort, it's like closer to zone 2 than anything. Totally fine. In fact, it will enhance your ability to recover in most cases. One thing that I'm liking more and more, this sounds like I said, this is going to confuse everybody. I get further and further away from zone 2. What I mean by that is like I start going towards zone 1 actually. Zone 2 is very sport specific, right? I'm trying to build economy and efficiency so that I can peak it for a competition. I don't need to do that. I need an aerobic signal that keeps all of the good processes of like sending blood and building, the ability to like power up mitochondria and the capillary network. I need all of that stuff to happen, but I'm not trying to get good at a sport. That's like the last thing I want to do actually. I might want to improve like my efficiency with like running maybe, but that's like, a narrow degree. And this is where I think this will be another, this is another hour to talk about the deficiencies in sport, but I think that's a wrong turn. So if you really want to keep your aerobic effort up, I think the lower the effort, the more useful. If you really think about it, some of the best designations for adaptations come from 1.5. So if I'm in the aerobic channel, or even just if you measure that as intensity, let's say 1 is the lowest intensity that I can get a signal from, like a zone 1 kind of deal. And it means I can expand the duration. 5 is like the highest intensity I could get. It's the most potent, which means I can like hold it the shortest. You will probably have the best fitness of your life if you break your fitness into those 2 realms, which means I'm like walking briskly and I'm like sprinting. Between those 2, you'll probably see the most healthy adaptations. Everything in between becomes very sport specific. And that's why, you know, we're always trying to figure it out in the middle, but that's also where the most damage comes from. These gray areas of training, blending too far in one way, pushing zone 2 too high, or pushing it too far, or trying to lift too many weights too frequently. Anybody else have any other questions before we get off of here?
No, good stuff.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah,
Good luck to everybody. I hope if you have any questions, just email me. You know, hopefully this next, I'll drop it tonight, so you'll see the first 3 sessions tonight if I get these videos done in time. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to just email me personally. If you want somebody to start the Quest 2 in the forum so you can start tracking. So if you really want to, like, you know, show what kind of progress you can, it does really help to have like some kind of accountability. I'll track mine and throw up my numbers so people can kind of see where I'm working from. Just so you guys know, like, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this was I came down, you know, after I tore my bicep last year, I lost quite a bit of mass because I had to stay away from like all of my favorite mass gain exercises. And so like, I was like, ah, shit, I'm just being kind of pathetic. And when I tried to rebuild it, actually, I ran into some issues with some mold toxicity. The mold toxicity, like all of the meds that I have to take for the mold toxicity are counteracting all of the growth factors. So I just started shriveling. They make me like incredibly not hungry. They make me not want to do anything. It's like, it's pretty miserable. So coming, like, the symptoms are starting to recede. It's been like since August. So I should be good to start again, but I'll be really surprised because I have like a lot of mass to build back. I probably lost maybe like 10 to 12 pounds since I've last checked, which is like discouraging at the age of 43. But I also, like, it's a good way to actually show people that, you know, you can do it. Like, this is not like, you know, you're 40 and you're dead. You're like, you can build mass your entire life. It's how biology works. So that was the kind of like secret reason for me to kind of push this through so other people. But as soon as I mentioned it, people got excited about it. So I think people like this kind of thing. So I think we'll have fun with it. But if somebody wants to kick off the forum for the Quest Part 2 and people can start posting kind of the progress, their thoughts, or their questions, that might be the easiest way to do it. So until then, hopefully you guys have good luck with it, and that'll be kind of fun for it. Talk to you guys later.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
let's go.
Grazie, Michael.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Good luck, guys.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.